April 22, 2025, a date that will be marked as one of the darkest days of the decade in southern Asia. A brutal terrorist attack in the Indian Kashmir region killed 26 civilians, most of them tourists who were there just looking for a little peace among the icy mountains. It was an unexpected and cowardly massacre that generated national commotion and immediate revolt. New Delhi did not hesitate to accuse those responsible. Jihadist groups Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, both with a long history of violent actions and alleged direct links with Pakistan. The Indian government classified the attack as an unacceptable provocation and promised a response to the height. And she came fast. Hours later, India launched the so-called Operation Sibir. According to official sources, it was a precise surgical military action involving long-range missiles, armed drones and state-of-the-art fighters. The targets were in Pakistani territory and would be centers of command, arsenals, and hiding places of Islamic militants. For India, this was a preventive measure, a coup of containment to avoid further attacks. For Pakistan, it was a blatant violation of his sovereignty. Islamabad responded tightly. Artillery bombings along the Kashmir control line, accusations of war crimes, and, according to their military, the slaughter of 5 Indian fighters, including modern Rafale, a pride in Indian aviation. To date, this information has not been confirmed by independent sources. Tensions reached a new level when Pakistan accused India of killing 26 civilians in its territory, including the destruction of a mosque in the middle of prayer. The Indian answer was cold, denied the accusations and stressed that all targets were strictly military. But the images released by residents of the regions affected in Pakistan, with rubble and bodies between the wreckage, inflamed their spirits further. It was no longer a simple exchange of fire. A severe climbing between two nuclear powers was underway with a bloody history. Since the former British Empire partition in 1947, India and Pakistan vying for each piece of the Kashmir region with blood, diplomacy, and often open war. There were 4 armed clashes: 1947 to 48, 1965, 1971, and the latest in 1999 during the so-called Kargil War. In all, the world observed closely, fearing the worst. Now, in 2025, fear is different. That such a conflict can get out of control and gain nuclear proportions. A calculation error, a missile out of the route, a pilot who reacts without permission. All of this can turn a dispute over territory into a global tragedy. What is at stake here is not just a rematch or a demonstration of strength. It is the stability of an entire region, and perhaps much more than that. Because when 2 powers with nuclear arsenals exchange bombs, the whole world holds breathing. India's military response to Operation Sibir was not just a direct retaliation. She revealed something bigger, a clear change in Indian strategic doctrine. New Delhi decided not to limit his response to the battlefield only. Parallel to airstrikes, the Indian government has announced the suspension of the Indian Waters Treaty, a vital agreement that regulates the use of shared rivers between the 2 countries since 1960. This movement has generated immediate impact, especially for Pakistani agriculture, which depends strongly on the waters from India. In addition, Pakistani diplomats were expelled, Indian airspace was closed to commercial flights from Pakistan, and economic measures began to be applied in silence, further increasing the pressure on Islamabad. The Pakistani government reacted aggressively, both in the military and media field. He accused India of acting irresponsibly, endangering millions of lives, and denounced what he called deliberate attacks against civilians. Videos began to circulate on social networks showing mutilated bodies, partially destroyed cities, and families in despair. Although many of these images did not originate, public commotion within Pakistan was intense. Manifestations took the streets of Islamabad, Karachi, and Lahore, with shouts of revenge and resistance. The Indian government, in turn, maintained its firm speech. The targets were terrorists, and Pakistan was once again welcoming who should fight. With the rapid climbing, the international community went on alert. The UN issued an appeal by containment, asking for the immediate end of hostilities and the return to dialogue. The United States, historic allies of India, began diplomatic contacts with both parties, trying to prevent conflict from crossing points without return. China, which maintains a close relationship with Pakistan and a silent rivalry with India, observed each movement carefully, without positioning itself openly. Beijing was merely asking for moderation, but behind the scenes reinforced logistical support to Pakistan, including military movements near the Sino-Indian border, which added another layer of tension to the board. Social networks amplified the crisis. Videos of bombing, images of flames, and inflamed speeches viralized minute by minute. On Twitter, hashtags like #Keksemra2025 and #WarAlert dominated the global trending topics. In New Delhi, analysts began to speak of an integrated response, an action model that unites military, diplomatic, and economic forces to contain threats while sending a clear message to enemies. India has changed its stance. It will no longer only react, but dissuade in full force. The risk, however, is evident. Any communication failure, any movement interpreted as offensive can be the trigger for something irreversible. The troops remain positioned on a maximum alert on both sides of the border. Armed fighters follow flying over the control line, and anti-aircraft batteries have been activated at strategic points. The rhetoric of the two governments gives no sign of retreat. On the contrary, both seem willing to take the dispute to the limit, even if this limit is collapse. The backdrop of this new confrontation is the never-healing wound of the 1947 partition. When the British Empire was undone, India and Pakistan were born as enemy nations, divided by religion, ideology, and, especially, by the territorial dispute of Keksemra. Since then, this mountainous and strategic region has become the center of successive armed conflicts. The 1947-48 war was the first attempt to occupy. In 1965, a new failed offensive. In 1971, Pakistan lost half of its territory with the creation of Bangladesh in a historic blow. In 1999, the world watched Kargil's war when Pakistani soldiers infiltrated the Indian Keksemra. And in 2019, Pulwama's attack rekindled the collective hatred. A suicide attack killed 40 Indian soldiers, leading India to bombard, for the first time since 1971, positions in Balakot, Pakistani territory. This history explains why the April 2025 attack was treated with such gravity. New Delhi interpreted the attack not as an isolated act, but as part of a continuous cycle of provocation and veiled support to jihadist groups. Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, pointed out as authors of the massacre, were already old acquaintances of the Indian authorities. These groups were responsible for several violent actions, including Mumbai's attack in 2008, which left 166 dead. Pakistan's tolerance with these organizations, seen by international intelligence as tools of its non-official foreign policy, feeds the narrative that Islamabad uses terrorism as a strategic instrument. However, Pakistan also finds itself as a victim. It claims that India treats Kashmirs as second-class citizens, with police repression, arbitrary arrests, and informational blackout. Since Narendra's government has revoked the autonomy of Keksemra, Indiana in 2019, the tension has increased dramatically. The militarization of the region, the cutting of communications, and the hardening of the laws created a suffocating environment, conducive to radicalization. Islamabad uses this argument to justify, albeit indirectly, insurgency. Meanwhile, civilians pay the price. On the one hand, Indian families burying tourists killed by extremists. On the other hand, Pakistani families reporting bombings that hit their homes, schools, and even religious places. The number of dead grows on both sides, but none of the nations admits error. Both claim to be defending themselves, and both accuse the other of terrorism. Internally, the two governments gain strength. In India, nationalism grows with inflamed discourses on social networks, rallies, and television debates. The Prime Minister Modi appears as a strong leader, ready to protect his people at any cost. In Pakistan, the discourse is that of heroic resistance, defending the territory and Muslims of Keksemra against Indian imperialism. The state press of the two countries feeds rivalry, portraying the other side as a historical and existential enemy. We are facing a dangerous spiral. The more governments feed this rhetoric, the harder it becomes any possibility of truce. And when the weapons replace the words, the chance of catastrophe is no longer a hypothesis and becomes a matter of time. The exchange of accusations raised the conflict to a new level. Pakistan said it had slaughtered 5 Indian fighters, including French models Rafale, information that has not yet been officially confirmed. But the psychological impact was deep. Videos of wreckage and fighters flying over urban areas fed the collective fear. In the streets, the climate was pre-war. Markets closed, schools suspended classes, and thousands fled regions near the control line. In New Delhi and Islamabad, governments reinforced discourses of readiness, placing their nuclear forces in state of reinforced surveillance. In the diplomatic field, India suspended the Treaty of the ALS of India, a measure that can drastically impact the economy of Pakistan. In parallel, he expelled diplomats, canceled visas, and closed airspace to Pakistani aircraft. This integrated military, economic, and diplomatic offensive shows a clear change in Indian posture. No longer just resisting, but neutralizing any threat in multiple fronts. It is a new, more aggressive, broader, and potential doctrine to change regional balance. The world observed with concern. The UN asked for restraint. The United States contacted directly with the leaders of both countries. But China, the faithful ally of Pakistan and strategic rival of India, maintained silence, which in itself is a significant gesture. Your position may be the faithful of the balance in a conflict that threatens to get out of control. Climbing continues, and the risk of military calculation error grows every hour. Any out-of-route missile, any misunderstood attack can trigger a total war, and between 2 nuclear powers, this is not just a local tragedy. It is a global threat. In the end, what remains is a silent warning. India and Pakistan walk on a fragile line between the dissuasion and the catastrophe. And if this line breaks, the whole world can be forced to watch powerless to the explosion of another war in Southern Asia. A war that doesn't matter to anyone, but with each new attack, it comes closer to the inevitable.